He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
The Coromandel is a huge part of the country, from the harbour to the peninsula and Coromandel town. This episode of Know My Town takes me to the east coast of the Coromandel Peninsula, where there's a bunch of small settlements like Hei Beach, Hot Water Beach and Whangamata, all in close-ish proximity to each other.
Yeah, so you're actually looking out at Whitianga River, so it changes from the bay into the river, so the river goes up through to Coromandel.
I'm in Whitianga, and while I'm here to find out about the story of this name, there's actually two extra names that relate to this area. It's a kinda complex story, but just like a good Christmas trifle, there's a few layers to it. So let's crack on. This is Know My Town, RNZ's podcast about Aotearoa place names, called Justine Murray. Aho.
And if you look across, even further across, you can see Ferry Landing.
When I visited Whitianga, it felt like I'd been here before. There's the touristy things and a few hidden gems, like a shipwreck just down the road.
The HMS Buffalo wrecked here in 1814, hence Buffalo Beach, and HMS Buffalo is an intrinsic part of our community.
There's even a ride for the kids.
Have a play on our pirate ship at the playground, which the pirate ship is actually called the HMS Buffalo. It's actually modelled after the HMS Buffalo, so that's really cool as well.
That's Rebecca Cox, by the way. She's the manager at the Mercury Bay Museum, and she's going to share the many stories about this town. And we go into work in chronological order with the arrival of an ancestor named Kupe. So the full name of Whitianga is...
Ko te whitianga a Kupe ki te tai tamahine It goes on for about 30 verses. Right.
Okay.
So it commemorates this particular crossing.
That's Joe Davis. He's a local leader of Ngāti Hei. Te whiti, the cross, anga,
Yeah, te whitianga
the
Kupe.
crossing
Yeah.
of Kupe.
Yeah.
And Joe says they don't know if Kupe crossed by the ocean or by the river. They just know that he came to this area. So a little bit about Kupe. He's regarded as the first Polynesian to sail across the Pacific to Aotearoa. We're talking around 900 to 940 AD. The story goes that Kupe left Hawaii in East Polynesia to give chase to an octopus called Te Wheke o Muturangi. In his pursuit of this wheke, Kupe sailed all around the Pacific Ocean. When Kupe's wife, Coromandel, saw a long white cloud, a sign that land was near, she shouted, Heao, Heao, Aotearoa, or a cloud, a long white cloud. And as you might know, Aotearoa is the Māori name of New Zealand. There are a few places named after Kupe's travels. Here's Rebecca Cox again.
Kupe was known to have come here and also named Taputapu Atea, which is a part of our spit along the beach. So both sacred names for us.
Taputapu Atea is also in Tahiti.
It is, absolutely.
After a while, Kupe returned to Hawaii. He departed from the Hokianga in the far north, the longer name of which is Te Hokianga Nui a Kupe, the place of Kupe's great return. The story about the second name begins about 300 years after Kupe left, and this time it has to do with a man named Hei, that's spelled Hei, a leader, a master navigator. He was on board the Te Arawa Waka, or double-hulled canoe. And just like the Tainui Waka, episode 5 of Know My Town, and the story of Manukau, Waka sailed to many parts of the North Island and South Islands, stopping off, sometimes getting out and planting mauri stones, a sign of their visit. They gathered more food and sailed on. It was the ultimate expedition. Joe Davis explains that ancestral connection.
Te Arawa Waka kone.
Which is more mostly known in Rotorua.
Yes.
The travels of these tupuna were all over the place, basically.
Yeah, that was that. We come down through Atua Matua, through that Puhaurangi line, Atua Matua, and then that's when we split off. Homai Tawhiti is a brother of Hei, the famous Homai Tawhiti, and then of course Tia.
Hei and Tia were twin brothers, and you might have heard of the name Tia, as in Taupo Nui a Tia, because, well, Tia settled in the Taupo region.
So we've got that tūwhare tō connection. We argue, who come first, Hei or Tia? Oh, well, naturally, Hei did call you te tuakana.
Okay, yeah.
Hey, but you turn it, when you go down there, no, it's Tia me Hei. So, so ka pai tira kōrero.
Okay, so figuring out who is the eldest brother who has more seniority in that whakapapa or genealogy is an ongoing friendly debate between Ngāti Hei and tribes in Taupo. And like Kupe, Hei named places as well, like Te Kūraitanga o Takuihu. Today it's known as Motueka or Pigeon Island off the coast of the Coromandel Peninsula. Ngāti Hei settled on the east coast of the Coromandel in places like Whitianga and Wharekaho, and there was another tribe as well, Ngāti Whanaunga. So again, another name in this area is
Te whanganui a Hei, or in the old way of saying it, Te whanga a Hei.
That name has changed slightly over time, as Joe says. The modern way is Te Whanganui o Hei. In the last and third part of the story, the next vessel to arrive to the east coast of the Coromandel Peninsula was the HMS Endeavour, led by Lieutenant James Cook. In June 1769, Cook and his team had observed the transit of Venus in Tahiti. It's like an eclipse when the planet moves between the Earth and the Sun. They then sailed on into the Pacific. And aside from sailing here for research purposes as part of this Royal Society expedition, this voyage was all about British expansion. Here's Joe Davis again.
He had secret orders on board to perform certain duties when he got here.
And those secret orders, or duties, was given by the British Admiralty.
You are likewise to observe the genius, temper, disposition, and number of natives, and endeavour by all proper means to cultivate a friendship and alliance with them.
On October 6th, they anchored out at Turanganui Akua, Poverty Bay, where there was a skirmish.
Not understanding the ritual of wero and porphyry, they thought that was an attack, and so they were shot. I think they lost about 6 of their rangatira.
There's much more to this story about Cook's first encounter on the East Coast, and Dr. Wayne Nutter talks about it on another No My Town episode about Uawa, Tolaga Bay. From Turanganui Akua, Cook sailed north to Tolaga Bay and Anoura Bay. They rounded Hicks Bay in late October. On November the 3rd, Cook arrived at Mercury Bay. The British had thought the land was uninhabited, but that wasn't the case.
He was surprised to see people living on what he would only describe, only shags would live there. But these people had palisaded and made a lot of these rocks. A lot of interesting things Cook saw at the time.
And one of those interesting things Cook wanted to see was
the transit of Mercury here in Mercury Bay.
Here's Rebecca Cox again, manager at the Mercury Bay Museum.
So the transit of Venus in Tahiti, those two observations helped with the longitude and latitude. So we were here in Te Whanganui o Hei, Mercury Bay, pinned to the map in 1769. So our coordinates were created in 1769.
Which was important back then. Cook was a pretty good cartographer. So that mission to see the transit of Mercury, as you may have guessed already, well, Cook gave the name Mercury Bay. We could end the story right there, but Cook's visit had more impact than just seeking out new plant life and observing the transit of Mercury. He stuck around for 12 days. So the Endeavour anchored here. It was out at Cook's Beach, that's about 35 kilometres away from Whitianga on land. Ngāti Hei and Ngāti Whanaunga lived there. And you can kind of imagine how imposing that was. Here's this gigantic vessel. And soon there were some advantages.
Trading went on, nails and stuff and pots and pans and what have you, material.
But under the cover of darkness, a Ngāti Whanaunga chief somehow got on board the Endeavour, and it turned out fatal.
He stole that bolt of cloth, and as a result, the first mate up and shot him. And he didn't know what being shot was. So, you can imagine the confusion.
This is bad, and it could have been much worse for James Cook and his crew.
There was a big I call it the judicial conference, was held that night on land.
And by judicial conference, I think what Joe Davis means is a wānanga, a kōrero about what actions or utu Tuawaka and his people should take.
The Endeavour was an inch away from being burnt to the ground. Right, there was going to be a massive taua go out and take them out.
But Tuawaka decided against burning the ship down. Instead, it was the opposite. He saw that forging a friendly relationship was better. So his people told him,
"He's your manuhiri, you look after him."
In other words, he's your responsibility.
So that's what he did. He became his protectorate around the bay.
Eventually, Tuawaka paddled out towards the Endeavour.
And so Cook noticed him, get him aboard. And the interesting thing in that conversation was that he described to Cook that you are here. And he wrote in charcoal a map of the North Island, basically, and the Coromandel and Whitianga Kupe, or Te Whanganui Hei, or Mercury Bay, as it's now known as.
Tuawaka agreed to formalise his and his people's relationship with Cook, so he invited him to a pōhiri, a welcome ceremony.
The pōhiri was really important. First time ever in Aotearoa, European were invited onto a marae.
About 100 people were at the pā to welcome them. Gifts were exchanged. Tuawaka gave a tour of the pā's palisades and explained their weapons, like their clubs they used, and their defence systems. And Cook gave them some spuds.
Cook handed over what was left in the bottom of the potato barrel to our people. He figured out, well, these people don't just shove it into their gobs and eat it. They really want to, get the plant growing. And we did.
3 names, 3 stories, right here on the east coast of the Coromandel Peninsula. Whitianga, te Whitianga a Kupe, to signify the arrival of Kupe, te Whanganui o Hei, or the Great Bay of Hei, and Mercury Bay, named by Cook to commemorate the transit of Mercury in 1769. And if you plan to spend some time here in Whitianga this summer, Joe and Rebecca have some tips, like what to do and where to go.
If you go to Opito, it's beautiful out there, Otama, on the Kuatunu side.
We have lots of different walking tracks and natural history areas that you can go and walk on and view, and grab one of the tourist boats and go out and see our bay from a different perspective.
Kia ora, thanks for listening. Also special thanks to Joe Davis, no Ngāti Taura, no Ngāti Hei, and Rebecca Cox, manager at the Mercury Bay Museum. The engineer for this episode was Steve Burridge. Special thanks to Justin Gregory for his help with this episode. If you know of a town that would make a good fit for this series, please email me, justine.murray@rnz.co.nz. Follow and listen to Know My Town, that's Naumai Town, wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoyed this, please tell your mates about it or leave a review. Ko Justine Murray aho, noho ora mai.